Beste collega's, voorgangers, kerkelijk werkers, fijn dat jullie hierop ingelogd zijn. Want we willen graag jullie aan Stephen Cherry voorstellen, die het boek heeft geschreven, Thy Will Be Done. En we vinden het een voorrecht dat we aan jullie kunnen introduceren. En dat we kunnen vertellen wat het boek inhoudt en hoe we jullie kunnen betrekken bij dat Lentboek wat we gaan lezen met elkaar in de tijd van de vaste tijd. Stephen, you're very welcome in the Netherlands.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be with you.
We are looking forward to reading your book, Thy Will Be Done. But the best part to introduce yourself is tell a bit about more yourself and how you came to write this book. And then we get on to the reading group and how we can make good efforts in reading your book.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be able to say a little bit. So my name is Stephen Cherry. I'm an English priest in the Church of England. I've been ordained since the 1980s and have served in a variety of places. Started in Manchester. I'm in Cambridge at the moment. I was in the English Midlands in a town called Loughborough, and then in the Northeast for a while in different kinds of roles. I come from a denominationally mixed family. My mother is Roman Catholic. My father wasn't particularly religious, but was from the Protestant side of Irish religion. So all my ancestors are Irish, although I've lived all my life in England. And my first study and my first interest was at school was in science. Then I moved at university to study psychology, and then, of course, to study theology after that. And I have retained an interest in psychology, and I'm very interested in the way in which we come to understand human beings in an ever more sophisticated and deep way through psychology. And I'm very keen to put that alongside theological insights. So one of the main things that I've been actually interested in myself as a big theological and human theme is the question of forgiveness. And in fact, this book might have been a book about forgiveness. I was first asked to write a Lent book about forgiveness. But I decided after a while that I would like to not try to squeeze the subject of forgiveness into the Lenten envelope, as it were, because I felt that was to force the subject in various ways. And then I had the idea that it occurred to me no one had ever written a Lent book on that familiar prayer, the Lord's Prayer, which is really at the center of Christian spirituality. So accessible, it's biblical, and yet it belongs to the church. It's at the heart of liturgy, and yet it's very common certainly in English-speaking culture. And I wondered what it would be like to just really dive deeply into that prayer and see what nourishment it might offer as a meditation, really, as a meditation for the period of Lent. So I did that in myself, and then the product of all that is the book that's been written.
Beautiful, beautiful. We have done this reading group already for several years, and we also had the time of reading your Barefoot Disciple book.
Okay,
so that was good. But now we are in this time 21. We are trying to read your book.
I'm afraid that's my clock.
No,
it's a bit slow.
Time goes on. But can you give some guidelines especially for pastors, how we can read this book as a spiritual instrument for our own lives? Because I think when I look at my studies and when I look at my education, prayer was not a subject for teaching. So can you give some, because I'm looking forward to reading together with the pastors this book. But the difficulty, we never talk very openly about our prayer life as pastors. So can you give some guidelines that we can make use of your book in getting into the more personal talks together, how we relate to this whole topic?
I hope so. But I may not start exactly where you want me to, because I think that one of the things about the Lord's Prayer is that it is in some ways quite different to the way in which people often pray, especially when they pray informally today. it's not very subjective. It's really quite objective, and it has no kind of attempt to tell God things that God doesn't know. We think God might not know, and it's the same prayer for everyone. So whereas a lot of praying today is, it's got to be personal, my particular thing. One of the things I noticed, I suppose what I've done is kind of looked at the prayer and read little treatises and series of sermons on the prayer by different theologians down the ages. And one of the things that comes across to me very clearly is that it's a prayer that comes in two halves. And it's very clear that the first half is very God-centered. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. It's the first sentence. It's all about God. And so the beginning of the prayer is the invitation to remember God, to put ourselves in God's place, in God's hands, in God's time, to let go of ourselves. Quite a profound statement, to acknowledge the godness of God. Hallowed be thy name. And there's a connection here with my book of 10 years ago, Barefoot Disciple, which had the theme of humility. Yeah. And so you could say that the first part of the Lord's Prayer is an invitation to humility. That may be something that is needs to be said to pastors sometimes, that actually it's not all about you. It's not all about us. It's not a pressure. It's not a stress. This is an easy thing to do. Let God be God. Theologians have said that very famously. But to let God be God in this minute, in this time, now. Let me honor God. That's the first half of the prayer. It's half of the prayer. That's a long way into it. Then very quickly it moves on to the second part, and we are remembering our neediness, bread, forgiveness, save us from temptation, deliver us from the evil one. What a panoply of things. Our bread, our nutrition, putting before God our most fundamental sense of what we need. Continues from the first one. You are God, I need bread. You are God. For bread, let us say it means the basics of life, safety, health, well-being, the ability to live. Give me what I need, God. Not more than I need, give me what I need. Then the whole realm of forgiveness, which in the English versions has very complex issues around the translation of this. And I hope the pastors who read this will be intrigued by the way in which I explore that and will be drawn into a sense of renewal of their ministry as ministers of forgiveness, not only of God's forgiveness through absolution and so on, but also ministers encouraging others to forgive and finding it in their own heart to forgive. Not in order to be forgiven by God, but because they have a sense of God's love and forgiveness for them, so they can share that. Yeah. And then the absolute realism of having temptation and the evil one in there. Even, we've had our needs satisfied, we've worked out our relationship, still temptation comes, temptation comes, temptation comes. It just says it there. And the evil one, not just evil, but the evil one, is the Greek words are very clear about this. And we're invited, I think, by this prayer now to have some sense of what the evil one might be in us and around us. Not a devil that rivals God, but some kind of disturbance of spirit that you can't escape from as a human being. So that's all there. There's such an agenda there. You don't need to be exotic or read big books or whatever to find agenda. No. Absolutely massive agenda there. And then I have included actually the doxology as part of my study here, which, although it's not biblical, it comes from the 3rd century. No. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours now and forever. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. Kingdom, we've already had that word. Power, glory. And I asked there, I think these really balance the first part of the prayer. First part of the prayer, our Father in heaven. Now we have kingdom, power, and glory. More abstract words, but completely expansive words, These are exploding out to the universe, these words. And they invite us to think about the nature of God's power, the nature of God's glory, and to rest, having let God be God in the first place, then we rest at the very end in the massive expanse of God's power and glory. That's the kind of agenda I feel that the Lord's Prayer sets if we study it. And it's so small and it's so gentle in holding us there. So I hope that if people just allow themselves to discuss the words, what the words mean to them.
Well, we are looking forward what's going to happen when we read together. And we pray also for this time.
Absolutely,
it will be a time of inspiration for the service in the communities God called us to. So thank you very much for having this time of introduction and sharing your insights and how we can make a good time at reading your book. I will go back to my Dutch pastors now in the Dutch, and thank you very much. We keep in touch, and we see you sometime in the week in Lent for having a meet with you, and then that would be beautiful. Thank you very much
indeed. Thank you.
And may God bless you also.
God bless you.
Beste collega's, dit was de mooie kennismaking met Stephen Cherry. Ik hoop dat je het Engels hebt kunnen volgen. Het was vrij makkelijk. Maar ik denk dat we een inspirerende tijd kunnen gaan hebben met dit boek en met deze auteur. Mooi dat we de auteur al ontmoet hebben. En we gaan daarmee beginnen in de vastentijd, vanaf de woensdag van de vastentijd, de aswoensdag, tot en met de week van Pampasen. Je vindt alle informatie op contemplatio.nl over deze Lentgroep, deze leesboekgroep. Daar vind je ook de informatie over dat we dit boek aan kunnen schaffen met een redelijke korting bij Bloomsbury, de uitgever. En dat we gebruik kunnen maken van een mooi aanbod met elkaar. Neem gerust met mij contact op als je vragen hebt over hoe we dat doen. We zien elkaar meestal op een vrijdagmiddag zo tussen 1 en half 2 even voor een chat met elkaar. Het zij via Zoom of via Messenger. Maar zo blijven we samen bij in het lezen van dit boeiende boek. Ik wens je veel moed en sterkte en creativiteit in deze COVID-tijd. Het is niet een makkelijke tijd, maar ik denk dat we met elkaar door deze komende tijd ook inspiratie op zullen doen om op onze plaats een bron van zegen en van bemoediging kunnen zijn voor de mensen die God op ons pad brengt. Het gaat jullie goed, vrede en alle goeds. En tot ziens in de lenttijd samen met dit boek. Dag.